Hello there, welcome to today's edition of World Panorama, our show where we get you a complete roundup of all the big international developments that unfolded this week. I'm Aishwarya Kapoor with you. Let us take a look at the top stories in the headlines first. Coronavirus infections in China are close to 35,000. 722 people, including Chinese doctor who warned about the virus, dead. WHO meet in Geneva next week on addressing situation. As Hong Kong reports first coronavirus death, medical workers strike to demand total border closure to contain the spread of the virus. Chief Executive Carrie Lam calls it impractical, imposes new quarantine rules. Donald Trump takes a victory lap after being acquitted on both articles of impeachment he faced, becomes third president in US history to be impeached by the House but acquitted in the Senate trial. Democrats and Republicans gear up for 3rd November elections. Trump to become first impeached president to seek re-election. First contest in Iowa to choose Democratic Party nominee witnesses chaos over app malfunctions and technical issues. And 4 dead, over a dozen injured as violence soars between Israelis and Palestinians. Israel sends additional troops to occupied West Bank. Palestinians blame Donald Trump peace plan for soaring tensions. The top story this week. The deadly coronavirus continues to take more lives. 722 people have died due to the virus, including a doctor who tried to warn about the new coronavirus. Dr. Li Wenliang had in December last year sent a message to fellow medics warning of the virus that he thought looked like SARS, another deadly coronavirus. But he was told by the police to stop making false comments and was investigated for spreading rumors. The government has admitted shortcomings and deficiencies in its response to the virus, which has now infected more than 34,000 people in mainland China. Hundreds of experts will now gather in Geneva early next week in an attempt to find a way to fight back against the outbreak by speeding up research into drugs and vaccines. This is China's Hubei province, the epicenter of the deadly novel coronavirus, where a major sterilization and disinfection program is being carried out in Yijiang city. The authorities mobilized close to 400 vehicles to sterilize main roads, residential communities, and farm produce fairs.
Each of us is to sterilize 25 floors, ground and underground parking lots, all levels and every place can contact with. We all live in this community and we are one family. So helping others is helping ourselves.
Chinese officials have stepped up efforts to control the outbreak, particularly in Hubei province where Wuhan is located. 2 hospitals have been speedily built and several public venues transformed into makeshift wards. Newly built hospitals are receiving more patients every day, but there is still shortage of beds and medical equipment. Millions in Hubei and Zhejiang provinces have been told only one person per household can go outside every 2 days.
We must admire the dedication of the workers and respect the sacrifice of Wuhan and other cities that have gone into this sort of social distancing exercise in order to try and interrupt transmission.
This week, a Chinese newborn was also diagnosed with the new coronavirus just 30 hours after birth, the youngest case recorded so far. The virus has spread overseas, with 25 nations confirming more than 230 cases. Although there has been so far only 2 deaths outside mainland China, one in Hong Kong and another in the Philippines. Countries around the world are taking measures, closing their borders and not giving visas to visiting Chinese nationals. In the Japanese port city of Yokohama, this ship with 3,700 people is on lockdown after 20 tested positive for coronavirus.
The highest priority for us is confirming the health situation of the ship's passenger and crew. We will put the best measure in place to prevent the spread of the infection.
Around 3,600 people on board another cruise ship docked in Hong Kong have also been confined to the ship after 3 previous passengers were found to have the virus. Many countries have airlifted their nationals from Wuhan, including US, India and Brazil. The WHO, that declared the outbreak a global health emergency, has appealed for $675 million to fund a 3-month response plan. It has called a meeting of health experts in Geneva next week to find solutions to the epidemic.
But we want to bring the best minds together, the people who have experience in this, so that we can come away with a comprehensive research agenda around the novel coronavirus.
The meeting comes as drug makers around the world are racing to develop vaccines or antivirals and other treatments to help those infected with the fast-spreading coronavirus. China has applied for a new patent on an experimental drug that its scientists believe might fight the coronavirus. The drug is being rushed into human trials in China on coronavirus patients after showing early signs of being highly effective. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Hong Kong is facing double devastation as coronavirus and civil unrest is taking its toll. Hundreds of health workers went on a strike this week, calling on the government to fully seal the border with mainland China amid fear of a fast-spreading coronavirus, something that Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam has so far rejected and dubbed as impractical and discriminatory. The government has closed most of the city's borders with the mainland China, but a few still remain open. Hong Kong has also begun a mandatory 2-week quarantine for anyone arriving from mainland China. Hong Kong saw its first death from the virus on Tuesday and has confirmed 26 cases so far. As coronavirus cases soared this week, semi-autonomous Chinese territory of Hong Kong saw hospitals scaling back services. This as thousands of medical workers went on a strike, demanding the closure of Hong Kong's border with mainland China. All but 2 of Hong Kong's land and sea crossings with the mainland China were closed on Monday, but striking workers say a complete closure of borders is necessary.
Our action might hindrance the operation in the hospital, but as a whole, in long term, if we don't do the strike or we don't bargain for more responses, the whole Hong Kong society will become ruined because of the epidemic.
The strike came as Hong Kong recorded its first coronavirus death on Tuesday morning. A 39-year-old man who had travelled to Wuhan, where the novel coronavirus was first detected in December. His family members have remained in quarantine.
In the last couple of days, we saw that he was coughing a lot more, and all of a sudden his situation got worse. His heart stopped and we tried to resuscitate him, but unfortunately we failed and the patient died.
Trust in Chinese authorities has plummeted following months of anti-government protests in the Asian financial hub. The territory's beleaguered leader, Carrie Lam, criticized the strike and said that the government was doing all it could to limit the flow of people across the border. She appealed to the striking staff to put the interests of the patients and the entire public health system above everything else.
Important services, critical operations have been affected, whether it is in the neonatal ICUs, in the isolation wards, or patients awaiting certain cancer treatments. All these have been affected.
However, for Hong Kong residents, the 2003 SARS epidemic still looms large. With a death toll of 299, the city had one of the highest fatality rates in the world at 17%, nearly 3 times that of mainland China, where the outbreak started.
No, nothing improved. Not enough equipment, no improvement about the equipment. So I think the government do not do anything for us to protect the staff of the hospital authority and the local people in Hong Kong.
Even as China scrambles to contain the spread of the coronavirus, tensions continue to simmer in the semi-autonomous Hong Kong. Economists are also pointing at the effect that the spread of the virus will have on both Chinese and Hong Kong's economy, predicting that it will take them at least a year to recover. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. US President Donald Trump has been acquitted in his Senate trial on both the articles of impeachment that he faced. Voting largely along party lines, the senators found Donald Trump not guilty of the first article of impeachment, abuse of power, by a 52-48 tally, and not guilty of the second article of impeachment, that is obstruction of Congress, by a 53-47 tally. Trump became the third president in US history to be impeached by the House of Representatives, but acquitted in a Senate trial. A two-thirds majority of 67 senators would have been required to remove him. Donald Trump took a victory lap after his acquittal. US President Donald Trump cleared in his impeachment trial. The Senate, run by the president's fellow Republicans, on Wednesday voted to acquit him 52-48 on charges of abuse of power and 53-47 on obstruction of Congress. Trump's acquittal was nearly entirely along party lines. Every Democrat voted to convict Donald Trump, and all but one Republican voted to acquit him. Only Senator Mitt Romney, a Republican from Utah, broke with his party and voted to remove the president from office by convicting him on abuse of power. The vote means Trump will remain in office.
The Democrats keep trying to run down this president because they know they can't run against this president. I think they tried to impeach this president because they know they can't defeat President Donald Trump in November of 2020. So that's all over now. It's all done now.
Democrats had charged Trump in December with pressuring Ukraine to smear his potential White House rival, Joe Biden. They also charged Trump with obstruction of Congress after the White House blocked testimony and documents sought by the House impeachment investigators. The final result came after nearly 2 weeks of a Senate trial, encompassing dozens of hours of oral arguments and more than 100 written questions from the senators, and more than 4 months after the impeachment inquiry first began in the House.
I'm glad it ended the way it did. I hope the message to the House of Representatives, don't do this again.
After the vote, Republicans said that the Democrats abused the impeachment process as a political weapon in an election year, while Democrats accused Republicans of shirking their constitutional duties in their support for Trump, even after multiple government officials testified that the president abused the authority of his office.
Madam Speaker, how do you feel after the vote today?
Very impressed by Senator Romney's statement. Now the president has been a bipartisan vote against him staying in office.
And what do you think it says, that message says?
That's all I'm going to say.
The Senate's verdict tenders Trump, the third president in US history to face impeachment charges in the House and be acquitted by the Senate. The two others being Andrew Johnson in 1868 and Bill Clinton in 1999. After the acquittal, small number of protesters gathered in major US cities.
I'd hoped that a couple of Republicans, other than the one, would have reacted and seen the light and, done the way they were talking. Some of them actually talked about how the president was guilty, but they still didn't follow through with it. So it's rather distressing.
If convicted on either charge, Trump would have had to turn over his office to Vice President Mike Pence. However, after the acquittal, the exonerated president has shifted his energy back to his re-election campaign. In November, Trump will become the first impeached president to seek re-election. Trump's acquittal in Senate was an expected result, but the impeachment trial clearly points to further deepening of political divisions in government and across the United States. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. With Donald Trump taking a victory lap after his acquittal in his impeachment trial, his Republican Party is now strengthening its election campaign to get ready for the 3rd of November US presidential poll. However, the start of the Democratic Party's nominee race saw chaos, with Iowa caucuses remaining too close to call. Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders remained neck and neck for most of the week, and Buttigieg finally came out narrowly on top. The announcement of the results was delayed after technical glitches with the vote counting. The impeachment trial may be over, but the fallout is not. US President Donald Trump made a victory lap after being acquitted by the Senate. Walking down a red carpet to a standing ovation from Republican lawmakers and other officials in the White House, Donald Trump accused Democrats of staging a corrupt effort to undermine his presidency.
It's a celebration because we have something that just worked out. I mean, it worked out. We went through hell unfairly, did nothing wrong. Did nothing wrong. I've done things wrong in my life, I will admit. Not purposely, but I've done things wrong. But this is what the end result is.
Trump's acquittal has shifted the attention to the 3rd November US presidential election. The acquittal has energized Trump's re-election campaign, with the experts saying the Senate vote showed that the Republican camp was witnessing unity, and that yesterday's critics of the president from his party also stood up to defend him. However, the contest on who will become the Democratic Party nominee who will take on Donald Trump is shrouded in mystery. The very first contest in the race takes place in Iowa, and it saw great confusion. The final results were 3 days later than expected amid technical problems and reporting delays, with the party finally declaring Pete Buttigieg the winner by a small margin. Buttigieg edged out Senator Bernie Sanders.
That fact represents an astonishing victory for this campaign, this candidacy, and this vision that you all have been a part of. This validates the idea that we can have a message, the same message, connect in urban and rural and suburban communities.
The results give Buttigieg a lead of 0.1% in the number of delegates selected, ahead of Sanders, although Sanders has a greater share of the popular vote.
Bottom line, I believe that we are well positioned to win the Democratic nomination and to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
The result also raised doubts about the future of one-time frontrunner Joe Biden, who finished a disappointing 4th. It is noteworthy that the impeachment vote drama was triggered by the allegations of Trump's campaign to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. After Iowa, race now moves to New Hampshire, where the next set of caucuses are held.
I like my chances, and I'm counting on you to, Jim, make sure you send me off in a way that there's nothing to come back from yet, but I'd like you to rocket me out of here to make sure this thing works, okay?
Iowa is the first contest in a string of nationwide state-by-state votes known as primaries and caucuses that will culminate in the crowning of a Democratic nominee at the party convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in July. 11 candidates remain in the Democratic field. It will be interesting to see how the impeachment drama and the interplay of other issues will decide on the 2020 US presidential election.
Trump is only one of the 3 presidents in US history to be impeached and the only president to seek re-election after being impeached. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And here is a look at some more international news stories in Global Buzz. With his anticipated acquittal in his impeachment trial a day away, US President Donald Trump used his annual State of the Union address on Tuesday to paint an optimistic picture of the country's future and tout the strong economy 9 months before Election Day. President Donald Trump hailed the great American comeback and set out his case for another 4 years in office. At one point, the Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi ripped up a copy of his speech behind him. The State of the Union address is a speech delivered by the President to Congress towards the beginning of each calendar year in office. Scores of koalas as well as many other animals have been found injured or dead on a blue gum plantation in southwest Victoria, Australia, after trees on the property were logged. Some koalas had starved to death in the remaining trees. Others were killed by bulldozers. More than 40 koalas have been killed, with the investigators saying that the number could rise as the felled timber is still being cleared. 30 were euthanized due to injuries suffered, in addition to those found dead on the site. Recent bushfires in Australia have taken the lives of thousands of koalas, a species already endangered in the country. And this latest incident is yet another hit on their habitats. Three persons were killed and close to 180 injured after a plane skidded off the runway on Wednesday as it tried to land in bad weather in Istanbul, crashing into a field and breaking into pieces. The passengers had to evacuate through cracks in the smashed plane. The low-cost plane with 177 passengers and crew on board was arriving at Istanbul's Sabiha Gökçen Airport from the western Turkish city of Izmir when it has what the Transportation Ministry described as a rough landing. The plane was a Boeing 737 that was 11 years old. And a South African court issued an arrest warrant for former President Jacob Zuma on Tuesday after he skipped court on the grounds of needing medical treatment. But the judge stayed the warrant until his corruption trial resumes on 6th of May. The former leader is on trial on 18 charges of fraud, racketeering and money laundering relating to a $2 billion arms deal with the French defense firm. He rejects the allegations as a politically motivated witch hunt. Four Palestinians have been killed and over a dozen Israeli soldiers wounded during a surge in violence just days after Donald Trump revealed his peace plan for the region. The Israeli parliament has now called a special session for Monday to discuss the recent wave of attacks, while the country's army said that it was deploying additional combat troops in the occupied West Bank. Remember, last Tuesday, US President Donald Trump had unveiled his Middle East peace plan, calling it the deal of the century, that analysts have called the most pro-Israel solution to the decades-old conflict to come out of the White House. Flare-up in violence in Israel and Palestinian territories days after US President Donald Trump unveiled his peace plan. On Thursday, 3 Palestinians were killed during clashes with Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. There were 2 shooting attacks in Jerusalem and the West Bank, in which Israeli security forces were wounded. 12 Israeli soldiers were also hurt in Jerusalem in what the army said was a Palestinian car ramming attack. There were also further Israeli airstrikes on militant sites in Gaza Strip after militants fired mortars into Israel. Israel has blamed Palestine for the flare-up in the violence.
I want to say something to Palestinian President. Violence won't help you, not the stabbing, not the car rammings, the shootings or the incitement. We will do everything needed to protect ourselves, determine our borders and ensure our future.
While Israel welcomed Donald Trump's peace plan, Palestinians rejected it, as it would leave them with a truncated territory surrounded by Israel and threaded through with Jewish settlements. They also fear an imminent Israel's plan to annex parts of the West Bank after March's general election.
Well, the problem is it doesn't take into consideration the Palestinian position at all. And it's very difficult to see how you get back from this position, because once you make concessions and put it on paper, it makes it very difficult.
A meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia also rejected Trump's Middle East plan. The Pan-Islamic body is the second largest intergovernmental organization after the United Nations. The ministerial level meeting took place 2 days after the Arab League also rejected the deal.
We urge the countries in our cooperation to refuse this deal and to never accept the American agenda or the Israeli colonialism in denying Palestinian rights for its people and leadership.
Earlier, the European Union also rejected parts of Trump's peace plan for the Middle East, saying that it departs from internationally agreed parameters.
We have heard about the new proposal brought by the United States on the so-called peace plan for Middle East. Jordan and the European Union, we are very much aware that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the longest, most painful and complex conflicts in our history. The experience over the last 50 years has shown that without agreement among all sides, no peace plan has the chance to succeed.
The plan announced by Trump last week, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at his side, would give Israel most of what it has sought during decades of conflict, including the disputed holy city of Jerusalem and nearly all the occupied land on which it has built settlements. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And with that, we wrap up this edition of World Panorama. But before we go, take a look at the visuals from Wat Chang Dang Buddhist Temple in south of Bangkok, where a project is on to recycle plastic bottles into fabric for robes for the monks. Now, unlike most temples where people go to pray and give alms, now devotees here offer plastic bags and bottles in exchange for blessings. The monks have crushed 40 tons of plastic over 2 years since starting the program, and the temple has produced at least 800 sets of robes, and more are in various stages of production. So take a look at this recycling temple. As I take your leave, I'll see you next week in another edition of World Panorama. See you then. Bye-bye.